You know, all of the information that you're ever going to give, that's ever going to be used against you, that anybody knows anything about, is going to be furnished by you. So if you can't keep your mouth shut, if you can't keep the information personal and private, then you can't have any privacy. That isn't too hard to figure out. So if you want privacy, the first thing you have to do is keep your mouth shut. And keep this in mind, the government doesn't have some CIA or FBI agent running around with a clipboard following you around everywhere you go and writing down all this information. They don't do that. They send a form to you, and they say, fill this out. And they cunningly coerce you into waiving your rights due to your ignorance. And you yourself don't know the law. Shouldn't you be familiar with all these laws? We have 2.5 million of them. I'm not sure that we need them all. They're all applicable to somebody somewhere at some time. I'm not sure that 2.5 million laws is good for us. I kind of like the Ten Commandments and the law of God because it's only composed of 759 statutes, judgments, and commandments. I can handle 759. 2.5 million I can't. I can't deal with that many laws. I can't even read that many laws. And like as not, I couldn't even comprehend them if I could read them. So there you are. But here's the moral to the story. Oftentimes, you will be cunningly coerced into waiving your rights due to your ignorance. Well, I don't have any credit card. First of all, I don't have any credit. And I don't need any credit because I have money. People with money don't need credit. People without money need credit. And people who need credit then have to give up certain portions of their privacy in order to get the credit from their master. And the guy who has the gold makes the rules, and the debtor is servant to the lender. I mean, these are old principles of life that have been around for thousands of years. The average American hasn't experienced much of that, but so I share that with you. What if you went into Denny's waitress, and the waitress comes over and says, it's the law, it's the policy of Denny's. Here, answer these questions before we serve you lunch. What would you think of that? Now, that's the essence of privacy. It really doesn't take a lot of work to be private. It takes a lot of work to be public. Because to be public, you've got to give this information out. You've got to fill out forms. You've got to go to the doctor's office and answer all the questions to give up your privacy. I mean, if you couldn't read, you couldn't write, and you couldn't talk, you'd be 100% private. Because all of the information about you is being given by you. You're the guy that's telling everybody everything. And you were taught to do this in the first grade. You were taught, when you walked into the first grade, first thing they taught you how to do is to put your name on the paper. Got to have your name on the paper. Pretty soon they taught you to put a date on the paper. Pretty soon they taught you to put the heading on the paper, arithmetic, spelling, or whatever. And your teacher taught you as you progress through the public indoctrination program that if you don't have anything to hide, there's no reason for you not to answer the question. So the policeman, when he asks you a question and you don't answer it, from his own training, he says, oh my God, this guy's got something to hide. People have asked me that, well, what is it that you're hiding? And I always tell them, well, if I told you what it was I was hiding, it wouldn't be hidden. If I told you what it is that I'm hiding, it wouldn't be hidden. So I'm not going to tell you what I'm hiding. I'm hiding my privacy. Privacy is something that I know that you don't know and I ain't telling. That's what privacy is. Nothing more, nothing less. I know, and I ain't talking. Did you know that birthdays are the highest holy day of witches and warlocks? Did you know it's a practice of witchcraft? Did you know it's prohibited in the Bible? Interrogations are restricted under the court's 1966 ruling in Miranda versus Arizona, which requires officers to warn the people that they arrest and question of their rights to remain silent and to see a lawyer. All right, so now if the policeman arrests you, or the policeman asks you, says to you, I want to ask you some questions. What's your name? If I give you my name, could that be the beginning point of a criminal investigation which would involve me? Well, either yes or no. Now, I want you to understand that the guy that's asking the question is in the master position in a master-servant relationship. Do I really want the police officer to be in the master's position or in the servant's position? See, George Gordon here sees police officers as servants of the public. But, you know, when you start asking me, what's your name, what's your address, what's your telephone number, so where do you work, how much money do you make, where do you bank, you know, when do you have sex with your wife, are you married, you know, you're starting to get into an area here that's none of your damn business, and I ain't telling. The police themselves, they want to know three things. They want to know your name, they want to know your social security number and your birth date, and that's the way you're traced. So getting rid of two of those is kind of neat. If you don't use a birth date, I mean, if you stopped today using your birth date, it wouldn't become a non sequitur forever to all sources forever. But in about 5 years, it would. For practical purposes, it would. And the same thing with your social security number. If you don't use credit, and you don't use bank accounts, and you don't use your social security number, and over time your business transactions disappear. Not every business transaction forever and ever, but most common business transactions just fall off the radar screen. So privacy begins with an opening. It begins with you saying to yourself, I think I'll start now. And then over a period of time, my social security number will become less and less obvious. Listen, the police beat up on people night and day. The Supreme Court in Miranda said there's 40,000 police agencies in the country, and 40,000, we expect one civil rights crime in every one of those agencies once every day. Now, just take 40,000 from the Supreme Court of the United States. 40,000, that's their number, times 365 days a year, 14,600,000 crimes committed by the police. Hell, there's only 14,200,000 crimes committed by the criminals, for crying out loud. The police commit more crimes against people than the criminals commit against people in this country. Carl F. Worden, I suspect he's probably an attorney, be my guess. And this comes from www.federalobserver.com and thefederalobserver.com. It's an article on Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is a privacy amendment. The First, the Fourth, and the Fifth Amendments are privacy amendments. Our founding fathers were concerned about crime, but they were particularly concerned about government crime. Particularly concerned about government crime. Crimes committed by the king against the people. Crimes committed by the nobility against the people. Crimes committed by the military forces against the people. That was their primary concern. Today, Americans are not concerned about government crime against the people. The government has focused our attention on crime that is committed by people against people. That is, rapists against women. And the government comes in and says, you need to be protected from those rapists. Now, ladies, your government, that is, your founding fathers in the Constitution of the United States, provided a protection mechanism. It's called the Second Amendment, your right to keep and bear arms. Women who carry guns in their purses aren't raped. There was a test done down in Dade County, Florida some years back in the 70s, I believe. They went down there and they armed 9,000 women out of a population of 2 or 3 million, just 9,000 women, publicized it all over. Had 9,000 women running around on the streets of Miami with guns in their purses. The rape rate, which was running one a day, 365 a year, dropped to, I think if I remember the numbers right, one a month, 12. In communities where people keep and bear arms, crime is low, or lower than it is in areas where people are disarmed, like Washington, D.C. That's just a statistical fact, and the government keeps hammering gun control, gun control, gun control. They do it in the media. They use the media constantly. Gun control. Gun control. If we had more gun control, we'd have less crime. Hell, we've got more gun control than we've ever had in our lives in this country, and we got more crime than ever before. When we had less gun control, we had less crime. The more gun control we get, the more crime we get. And government fosters that crime through policy. Carl Worden gives us some insight on contact with the police. So let me start with law enforcement contacts with regard to traffic stops for suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights states that we are not to be forced to incriminate ourselves. The actual wording is that you cannot be compelled to be a witness against yourself. If you are stopped for suspicion of DUI, these are your rights, regardless of the laws of your state. First of all, you are to deny having consumed any alcoholic beverages whatsoever. You are never to admit to having one or two drinks. If you admit to consuming even one drop of alcohol, you open the door to probable cause, allowing the police officer to search your car for open containers. Next, you're never to submit to a field sobriety test. You are to refuse to do so. They cannot make you walk the line. They cannot make you balance or anything else. Now, when you are arrested, you are to refuse to allow a blood or breath test, regardless of what state law requires, such as revocation of driving privileges for a period of time. That's an attempt to compel you to be a witness against yourself. Supreme Court decisions in this area are very specific with regard to your rights as follows. Lefkowitz versus Turley. And the Fifth Amendment provides that no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. The Fifth Amendment not only protects the individual against being involuntarily called as a witness against himself in a criminal prosecution, but also privileges him from not answering official questions put to him in any other proceeding, civil or criminal, formal or informal, where the answers might incriminate him in future criminal proceedings. In Castigar versus United States, we recently reaffirmed the principle that the privilege against self-incrimination can be asserted in any proceeding, civil or criminal, administrative or judicial, investigatory or adjudicatory. The police use tactics, and they capitalize on the fact that you've been divorced from your Constitution and Bill of Rights. Divorced in the public education system, you probably learned nothing about them. Anything you know about them, if you've read in the newspaper, Uncle Tom or Aunt Bessie told you about it. But, generally speaking, the average American is a constitutional illiterate. He's a biblical illiterate, and he's a constitutional illiterate, complaining about why it is he's lost his rights. Now, your rights are lost not because somebody took them from you, but because you're unable to claim them. And I pointed this out earlier that Judge Schmidt, when he gave me my civics lesson in jurisprudence, he said, "How many rights do you have, Gordon?" And I articulated about 10. He was surprised. He said, "That's really good. Most people, if I ask them how many rights have you got, they can name one or two maybe. You've got 8 or 10 there. That's pretty good. You have about 1,100. So if you will give him the answers that he's asking, then he can use that evidence against. Just try it. The policeman stops you, and he comes up to the window and, "Good evening, and how's everything going? Hey, I notice you're weaving a little in your lane over here. Have you been drinking?" "Well, yeah, I had a couple of beers, but I'm not drunk." That's all he needs. There's the probable cause right out of your mouth. You admitted that you've been drinking. Now the question is, well, how much have you been drinking? There are rules that need to be followed, and the police need to follow the rules. If we're going to have freedom, liberty, if we're going to have privacy, then everybody has to follow the rules. So we have adopted the Roman civil law in place of the Mosaic law. Whether it's good or bad or right or wrong, I'm not here to judge it. It's been done, past tense. We have what's known as the adversarial system. It's a contest. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you're guilty. It has to do with whether or not I'm a good enough lawyer to convict you. And you damn well better be a good enough lawyer to defend yourself and to defeat me, because my job as the prosecutor is to lock you up. And whether or not you did it or not is irrelevant. Can you understand that? This adversarial system over here is the cause of it. It's a money-making system. The adversarial system makes money. And I deplore it. It's criminal. The problem isn't with the criminals on the street, it's the criminals in government, for crying out loud. Now today, this is big business, and auto tickets and the police out here on the highways enforcing the traffic laws. In some communities, it's the difference between bankruptcy and solvency is the number of tickets that are written in a particular community to support local government. In fact, it's big business. I'll give you a number here. Old Judge Woods used to be the champion up in Boise, Idaho. It's Ada County. And he did 6 sessions a day, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, and then take off till 1:30, then work from 1:30 to 2:30, 3:30, and 4:30. And then they'd leave the courthouse, at 5 o'clock. Judge Woods would do one case a minute. Now that's 45 cases an hour. And he only worked 45-minute shifts, and he had a 15-minute coffee break, and then he'd take on the next round. And he would line these people up, 5 in a line, and Carol, his court clerk over there, would call out 5 names, and then so you'd line up over there, and then the judge would come in, and then they'd read you your rights and one thing and another, and you'd go through the process. Now, Judge Woods was raking in about $10,000 a day in his courtroom. They're running 3 courtrooms. Now, he's the champion. The others are only running something less than that. So let's give them, say half that. The other 2 guys are slow, and so they can only do half that. That's $20,000 a day. So take $20,000 a day times 5 days a week. That's $100,000 a week times 52 weeks a year. That's $5,200,000 of revenue that comes into Ada County from traffic citations. This is back in 1980. If everybody in Ada County obeyed all the traffic laws, never violated any of the traffic laws at any time for any cause or reason for 1 whole year, Ada County and Boise City would go into bankruptcy. Well, these policemen, with all the police resources that are out there, they're not interested in rapists, robbers, and murderers. They're interested in seat belts and stop signs and driver's licenses and registrations and whether or not you've got your proof of insurance. The victimless crimes that don't amount to 2 hoots in a whirlwind don't have anything to do with protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Nothing. Oh, the police now are trained to get the evidence from you, not by force and violence, although that happens from time to time, but rather to do it subtly, to trick you. Now, there can be no doubt that the Fifth Amendment privilege is available outside of criminal court proceedings and serves to protect persons in all settings in which their freedom of action is curtailed in any significant way from being compelled to incriminate themselves. So you ask the policeman, am I free to go? And he says, no. Okay. You're in custody. Shut up. What's your name? I don't want to talk without my attorney present. Now, sometimes I had one cop one time tell me, he said, well, we'll bring a lawyer in here. I said, good, I want F. Lee Bailey. Guy says, well, you can't have F. Lee Bailey. Well, who am I going to get? You're going to get the public defender. I don't want the public defender. He said, well, then you're denying, you're refusing counsel. Oh, no. I'm not refusing counsel. I'm just not going to accept your lawyer, partner. But the public defender works for the state. The policeman works for the state. Can you explain to me what the difference is when the policeman says, hey, let me give you my lawyer, spill your guts to him? Huh? You think the public defender is working for defendants, for crying out loud? Ask the public defender. Just test it. Ask the public defender, how many criminal cases have you ever won as a public defender? I asked that one time of Larry Richards, and he said to me, it's not the job of the public defender to win his client's case. At some point in time, you've got to say, hey, Mr. Policeman, you're violating my rights. It's up to you to tell him. It's an adversarial position. The policeman against you. He's not your friend. If you think that the policeman's your friend, you got your head up the wrong end of your anatomy again. The policeman is your adversary. It's not supposed to be that way, and it wasn't always that way. When we practiced the Ten Commandments, the policeman was our friend in a judicial system, a justice system. Today, we have a monetary system, not a judicial system. It's money. And the policeman's job is to get the goods on you and convict you so that we can fine you and make money. He's a revenue agent. Nothing more, nothing less. He's there to protect the claims window of the insurance industry. That's why he insists that you have your seat belt fastened. Whether or not you wear a seatbelt doesn't make a rat's rectum to me one way or the other, or you or anybody else, but it does to the insurance industry. And the policeman is out there to protect the insurance industry. He's not out there to protect you. Most Americans believe that if a policeman asks them a question, they've got to answer it. But when the policeman asks you questions like, have you been drinking, or where are you going, or where are you coming from, you don't have to talk to him. You don't have to answer him. You don't have to say anything. If you're a policeman, you know you're a revenue agent. And the police, they vehemently deny that they've got a quota system. Excuse me. Let's be intelligent people over here. Mr. Policeman, try writing no tickets whatsoever for 30 days and see what happens to your job. The big complaint that we all ought to have is the police being used as revenue generators. We'd find the police would be more helpful and less adversarial. And the policeman is a part of an adversarial system, so he's not your friend. And don't expect the policeman to be protecting your rights. He's working against your rights. He's working for the state, remember? He's your adversary. He's not going to tell you. In fact, he might even lie to you about it and say, well, you don't have that right, it's privilege. It's up to you to know what your rights are. After all, you're the master, aren't you? Does the master go to his servant and ask him what the law is, for crying out loud? If the policeman is your servant, do you ask your servant? Or do you tell your servant what the law is? If more individuals were to understand their rights and exercise them at the appropriate times, we'd be a whole lot more successful in reining in the tyranny that you're all complaining about here in America. Remember, the police are seeking evidence to be used against you. And they tell you that very plainly. I mean, you got to be stupid to sit here and talk to a guy that says to you very plainly, looks you right in the eyeball and says, you have a right to remain silent, and anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. Now, let's get down to where were you going? Where were you coming from? And what's your name, address, and telephone number, and social security number, and are you married, and how many children do you have, and where do you work, and how much money do you make? You've got to be nuts to answer any questions. Now, when you're given your Miranda rights, wherein you are informed that anything you say can and will be used against you, take it to heart. If you say absolutely nothing, keep your mouth shut. Nothing can and will be used against you in a court of law. If you say nothing, nothing will be used against you. If you say something, something will be used against you. Now, because you've stayed mute, giving law enforcement nothing in addition to the extrinsic evidence and witness information at hand, the burden of proof available to the district attorney is severely limited, and will most often result in a dismissal of charges unless their evidence and witness input is overwhelming and compelling enough for a grand jury to return a bill of indictment. Law enforcement officers are trained to bluff you into making denials, into making statements, and they will appear friendly, and they appear reasonable, and they will appear willing to help resolve the matter. They will pose as your friend, and they will tempt you to talk about it and to appear sympathetic. Don't fall for it. Say nothing. Give them nothing. Deny everything. Deny nothing. Give them nothing.
Stick your tongue between your teeth and bite down hard. You are to be a marble statue. You do not exist. You have no past. You have no address. You have no name. You have no social security number. You are to give them nothing whatsoever to work with. Now that's the advice of an attorney. A question comes up in law quite often. Can you waive your rights? And the answer is yes. Does contract supersede your rights? And the answer is yes, it does. So when you sign a contract, you can sign your rights away, because these contracts are written in fine print so that you cannot understand. You cannot read it, first of all, and if you could read it, unless you've got a degree from college, you probably couldn't understand it anyway. And oftentimes I need a dictionary to read a contract. And once I learned how to read, I stopped signing these contracts. That's why I don't have any credit cards. If you could read the contract, you wouldn't have a credit card either. People that can read don't have credit cards, because of the power that it gives to the bank or to any other agency, any other seller that you're contracting with. There's just nothing like paying cash and walking out with the goods that you own. So what you need to do is to wait until you can afford to buy what it is that you want. The big screen TV's $2,000. I'm not sure that Americans are able to think anymore. And I think we've been indoctrinated to the point that today education is a word that we use, but it doesn't have any meaning. Indoctrination, I think, is the better term. Credit information is personal financial information, and it isn't just financial. They want all kinds of other things, all kinds of other information as well. And each and every person that you give this kind of information to depreciates your overall privacy. So here's something for you to keep in mind. Gold is the currency of kings. How much do you know about Queen Elizabeth? Do you know how much money she makes? Do you know how many castles she owns? Now there's a lot that woman is a very public woman. She's out in the limelight. She's out waving, to people in crowds, and she's traveling in motorcades. And you get right down to it, you don't know very much about that woman. She's a pretty private lady, and she does business in gold, and that's because kings do business in gold. Silver is the currency of gentlemen. And barter is the currency of peasants. Debt is the currency of slaves. When you do business in gold and silver coin, you do business in privacy. When you do business in barter, you do business in privacy. When you do business in debt, you do it publicly, and there's no privacy. Federal Reserve notes are debt notes, and credit cards are debt. Commercial contracts are debt. When you do business in debt, you do business like a slave. Slaves do not have privacy. Now, people who cannot contain themselves, they just can't wait, are poor. And they're poor because they can't wait. A man that has money doesn't need credit. But my name, my social security number, and my birth date are the three identifiers that they need to steal my identification. Why would I want to give the three identification theft and deceit to total strangers, for crying out loud? Now, people in America are concerned about identity theft. Do you want to give this information to strangers? And this is the kind of thing you're bombarded with, from the time you're 6 years old when you go into public school. And you're taught and trained, as a child, that, if you don't have anything to hide, if you're not doing anything wrong, well, then why wouldn't you want to share this information with others? Well, the reason is because I want to have some privacy. Why don't you want to share this with us? Because I don't want you to know. It's none of your damn business. Now, you can be just as private as you want to be. Nobody knows anything about you that you haven't told them. Maybe I'd like to have some privacy. Most people don't want privacy, so I don't want to force privacy on people that don't want it.
Did you know that you could open a bank account in a bank without a social security number? Just because somebody says you can't open a bank account without a Social Security number doesn't make it true. There are lots of bank accounts out there without Social Security numbers. So if some guys could do that, well, then maybe others could do it. Maybe you could do it if you were so inclined. Banks don't encourage you to open a bank account without a Social Security number, even though they know it can be done. I know it can be done, and you probably don't, because they want everybody to have a Social Security number when they open a bank account. Now, the reason I bring this up is because privacy is something that is entirely personal. Privacy isn't something that the government guarantees you or that the government encourages you to participate in. In fact, quite the opposite. Now, remember, you've got three identifiers. Your Social Security number, your birth date, and your name are your three identifiers. With those three pieces of information, I can clean out your bank account. I'm going to keep my Social Security number real private. I'm going to keep my birthday real private. Now, my name's pretty public, but then my name is not what you need to steal from me. You've got to have those three. I recently received an email from a Texas author who requested information relating to opening a bank account without a Social Security number, so here's the text of the request. He said, I have an associate who's looking for information about the opening of a bank account without a Social Security number. If anyone can put their hands on that information or point me in the right direction, please respond. So I responded and suggested that this was a form of discrimination by the bank, and I suspected that if the individual in question were to begin litigation, the bank would fold and open the desired account. But a much better response was returned, and in turn the Texas author forwarded it to everyone on his list. I was one such recipient. So for those of you seeking such information, this has the potential to be very helpful. So here's the return. Daniel, the subject, bank account with no Social Security number. Hi, I just wanted to drop you a line, let you know about a recent small victory in the no Social Security number corner. I recently tried to open a bank account with my local bank, and when they asked for a Social Security number, I informed them that I didn't have one. They flatly refused to open the account and said that without a Social Security number, that they absolutely could not open an account of any kind. So I then proceeded thus to convince them that they were wrong. First, I informed them that I had terminated my Social Security number legally in accordance with 20 CFR 3A7 404.1905. And, two, I informed them that the bank could not be held legally responsible by anyone for failing to obtain a Social Security number from me pursuant to 31 CFR 103.34A1, and 3, I informed them that under the Internal Revenue Code, Section 6041, that they were not even required to provide any taxpayer identification numbers on the Form 1099 that they filed with the IRS at the end of every year. And 4, I informed them that pursuant to 26 CFR 301.6109-1C, that they were under no legal obligation to obtain a Social Security number from me. And 5, I informed them that 42 U.S.C. 408 makes it a felony to use threat, duress, or coercion to try to force a person by fear or deceit to provide his Social Security number in any unlawful manner. After a brief meeting with the bank's controller and legal counsel, I received a phone call stating that I would be allowed to open a checking account. So please pass this information along to your readers in hopes that they may, or it may help someone else who may find themselves in that situation. And also in the response are the sections of law to which the above references. That's the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 20, Volume 2, revised as of April 1st, 2003, and from the U.S. Government Printing Office by way of the GPO Access site, 20 CFR 404.1902, on pages 557 and 558. All right, let's stop right there. Can you see that there are ways, with a little knowledge between your ears, that you can accomplish some things that other people would consider to be impossible? Now, I'm not here to get you to open a bank account without a Social Security number, because I really don't care. I couldn't imagine why anybody would want to open a bank account. So I used to have a bank account. I used to think that it was necessary and imperative. But there's no privacy with a bank account. They had a guy on the show who was called a skip tracer. And he said, okay, he started off, he had a few notes, and he said, this man is a middle management government employee, probably a GS 12, 13, or 14. He lives in Arlington, Virginia. And he has an ex-wife, he's divorced, and he has two daughters, two girls. Both of them are girls. He drives this kind of a car. He identified his car. And he lives at, and he gave us his address. And he said his alimony payment is, and he gave the alimony payment. He says his child support payment is, and he gave the child support payment. And he said he wears this kind of a suit and shoes, and so he identified his suit and shoes, and he went on down the list. And I mean to tell you, boys and girls, he could tell more off of that guy's canceled checks than that guy could have told about himself. Because the guy that wrote all those checks could not possibly have remembered every one of those transactions and what it was that he revealed by his own hand. Now, remember, the guy that's writing the checks, over in the corner, there's a thing called memo, where you jot down, well, here's what I spent this on. Well, now remember, think about the guy's suits. How does the skip tracer know that this guy wears Hickey Freeman suits and wingtip shoes? Well, because when he wrote the check to pay for the suit, he wrote it out to a particular clothier, didn't he? And so now, all you got to do is get on the telephone and ask the clothier, what kind of suits do you sell? And the clothier says, oh, well, we sell Hickey Freeman. Okay. So this guy wrote a check to the clothier who handles Hickey Freeman suits. And so we can deduce then that this guy wears Hickey Freeman suits. And maybe he even uses the memo box and tells us that he bought a Hickey Freeman suit. But even if you don't use the memo box, we know where you bought the suit, don't we? We know where you bought the shoes, don't we? And so when you write your daughter a birthday gift of $50, you write out the check to your daughter, Megan, $50, and in the memo you put down birthday. Well, okay, so now you know the skip tracer knows that you've got at least one daughter named Megan that you gave $50 to for her birthday. You got an alimony check in there. It's marked alimony, where it's written out to the prosecuting attorney's office. And so, it's for $850, and so here's your alimony check. Here's the child support check. Here's all of these checks that go out here tell us about your lifestyle. A check that's written to U.S. News and World Report tells us that you're a conservative. A check written to Time Magazine tells us you're a liberal. A check written to Field and Stream tells us you're a sportsman. A check written to Guns and Ammo tells us that you're a gun owner. A check written to the National Rifle Association tells us that you're an activist gun owner. Those checks that you write tell an awful lot about you. And so the audience is sitting there kind of gasped. I was absolutely dumbfounded. I had never seen anything like that in my life, and when I saw it, I made a resolve right then. I said, I'm going to close my checking account. Now, the average person today is taught that if he doesn't have anything to hide, then why not tell it? Well, I could come back to bite you in the butt, and there's a thing here called brainwashing. The police use brainwashing on you in their interrogation. The highway patrolman is using brainwashing techniques when he approaches the window and asks you for your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. All of us are motivated by 5 motivators. Let me tell you what these 5 motivators are, and let me show you how this works. You're a very vain person. All of us are. So vanity is a characteristic of human nature, designed by God himself and stuck into your brain. You suffer from this malady called vanity, whether you like it or not. And then there's an emotion called jealousy. when you see somebody have something, and it may be that you think, you know this person, and you say to yourself, that person absolutely does not deserve a Corvette. But yet here's this guy driving around in a Corvette, and it just really bugs you because he's got a Corvette and you've got a Chevy Nova, and it just really burns your buns. Okay, that's called jealousy. Very normal emotion. Don't think for a minute, that you're suffering from some mental deficiency here. Then you get another emotion called lust. It's an inordinate desire for something that you don't want, can't use, shouldn't have, don't need, but you want it anyway. You're married and you got a wife and 5 kids, and then here comes this beautiful secretary down the hall, and you say to yourself, wow, boy, could I have fun with her. Okay, that's lust. That's sexual lust, but it could be lust after his job, or over his car, or something else. So here's vanity, jealousy, lust. Here's another one, greed. Greed. I don't have enough. I've always asked people, that said to me, you've got too much. Other guy tell me that one time. He says, you've got too much. And I said, well, how much is enough? I've never met a man yet that had enough money. Boys and girls, I've been working all my life, and I still don't have enough money. Boys and girls, if I had $1 million, it would only be half enough. I know, because I've been there, and I've been back, and I can tell you right now, I've never had enough money. And you can take Donald Trump. That guy gets up every morning and goes to work. I don't know how much money the guy's got, but it ain't enough. Donald Trump doesn't have enough money yet. And I'm not sure that he knows how much is enough either. Bill Gates gets up every day and goes to work. He's got $37 billion. He doesn't have enough. Finally, we've got vanity, jealousy, lust, greed, and fear. Fear. Don't forget this fear. Insurance salesmen sell insurance by fear. They come to you and they say, oh my God, your house could burn to the ground in a Santa Ana wind in San Diego, California. You say, oh my God, yeah. Houses burn down in Santa Ana winds, and so therefore, I need insurance. I need fire insurance. Furthermore, the bank says we won't give you a mortgage on your house unless you have fire insurance. All right. Has it occurred to you that people are using cunning coercion to get you to do something that you wouldn't naturally or normally do, but which you can be nudged, you can be pushed into doing? Nobody's putting a gun to your head. Nobody's whipping you with a whip and drawing blood, but yet you can be motivated through vanity, jealousy, lust, greed, and fear to do things that you wouldn't think that you want to do. And that's brainwashing. Brainwashing. That's not exactly 100% of the definition of brainwashing. It's really called, if you want to go to the CIA, they call it a synthesis of the Russian textbook on psychopolitics. And psychopolitics is the art and science of asserting and maintaining dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus, and masses of people, and the effecting of the conquest of enemy nations through mental healing. America has been conquered. You've been conquered by your own government, your own bureaucracy. They're already in full control. When the policeman stops you alongside the road, you're motivated by fear, and when he says, I want your driver's license, registration, and insurance, you say, yes, sir, and give it to him. I'm not telling you that it's wrong. I'm just telling you that that's where it starts. The guy who asks the question is the master. The man who is answering the questions is the servant. Having a driver's license in your pocket and operating a motor vehicle is a guardian-ward relationship called a privilege to drive, which is governed and exercised by the state through their agents. It's a guardian-ward relationship in which you're the ward and they're the guardian. Now, you see yourself as being the master, the sovereign, the voter, and these are public servants. That's not true, and you know it. And the next year they're going to come up with a new document. It's called your National Identification Card. And I'm not going to go down and get one. And there's going to be some things that I will not be able to do in life without one. So I'm going to be more inconvenienced than you are. But I'm going to have more privacy than you do. There are some people, that aren't going to get the mark of the beast. There are some people that are motivated by right and wrong, and they just simply say, right's right and wrong's wrong. And so they follow this biblical principle in Acts 5:29. We ought to obey God rather than men. The problem with Social Security is that it's the mark of the beast. The problem with Social Security is it's limited liability. The problem with Social Security is it's a contract with the state. All of these activities are prohibited by the laws of God. God told us not to do that. Christians, of course, they don't follow the law of God. They follow the law of the state. Most people can be cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to their ignorance, and therefore they cannot have privacy. And that's because they can't say no. Right's right, wrong's wrong. That's the end of the argument. I'm right, you're wrong. Sit down and shut up. Now, when I'm wrong, I sit down and I shut up. But I wasn't wrong. And furthermore, I've got privacy interests that are involved here. And I'm going to exercise my rights, and I'm going to exercise my privacy. So if you want to be private, you can be. But if you want to be public, it's more convenient, and it's more common. So if you want to be common, be public. If you want to be uncommon, be private. That's the bottom line. So privacy is available to all of us.